The bright lights of Station Omega-7 hurt Kyung-ho's eyes as he walked down the metal corridor. Other beings moved past him without looking. Some had 4 arms. Others looked like walking crystals. A few were just floating balls of light. None of them cared about the human from Earth. Kyung-ho reached the big meeting room. Inside, hundreds of alien species sat in a circle. They were talking about trade routes and mining rights. When Earth's name came up, they barely spent 2 minutes on it. The Velthak ambassador, a tall crystal being that sparkled blue, spoke in a cold voice. Earth. Class D, primitive world. Nothing important to discuss. The other aliens agreed. They moved on to talk about more important planets. Kyung-ho sat in his small chair at the back. No one asked for his opinion. They never did. After the meeting, Kyung-ho walked to the station's viewing deck. Through the massive window, he could see ships from dozens of worlds. The Velthak ships looked like flying diamonds. The Morvanian vessels were just pure energy held in force fields. Earth's single transport ship looked like scrap metal next to them. Still feeling sorry for yourself? A voice said behind him. Kyung-ho turned around. Dr. Hai-jin stood there with a data pad in her hands. She worked on the research vessel called Harmony. It was one of only 3 human ships allowed in this part of space. They didn't even listen, Kyung-ho said. When I tried to speak about our new fusion engines, they laughed. Actually laughed. Hai-jin sat down next to him. I know. I heard the recording. The Velthak said we still use baby fusion technology. What did your research show today? Kyung-ho asked. Hai-jin looked at her data pad. More of the same. I studied 12 different species today. They all think humans are interesting. Pets. Good for manual labor. Too emotional to be trusted with real technology. She showed him the screen. It had notes about different alien species and what they thought about humans. The words were not kind. Chaotic. Unpredictable. Crude thinking. Violence-prone. Thamay. Morvanian scientists told me today that humans are biological curiosities, Hai-jin continued. He said our brains work too fast and jump around too much. He called it mental noise. Kyung-ho laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Mental noise. That's what they call creativity. On the viewing deck, a group of young Velthak walked by. They pointed at Kyung-ho and Hai-jin and made clicking sounds. It was their way of laughing. One of them spoke in perfect English. Look, the apes are talking to each other. Do you think they understand big words? The group moved on, still making clicking sounds. Kyung-ho felt his face get hot with anger, but he stayed quiet. Getting angry would just prove their point about humans being too emotional. I read the Federation files about us, Hai-jin said, quietly. Want to know what they really think? Kyung-ho nodded. They say humans use primitive kinetic weapons. That means our guns and missiles. They think it's funny that we still throw things at our enemies instead of using energy beams. What else? They call our nuclear power crude fusion. Most species learned to control matter and energy directly millions of years ago. They don't need to split atoms for power. Hai-jin touched the screen again. But this is the worst part. They say humans are too chaotic for advanced civilization. Our emotions make us unreliable. Our creativity makes us dangerous. They think we change our minds too fast. A new ship arrived at the station. It was massive and looked like it was made of living bone. Kyung-ho had never seen anything like it. Whose ship is that? He asked. Hai-jin checked her pad. Draconian Empire. They're one of the oldest species in the galaxy. Been around for 50 million years. The bone ship moved slowly toward the docking bay. As it got closer, Kyung-ho could see that it really was alive. Parts of it moved like breathing. Strange symbols glowed along its sides. "The Draconians think humans are babies," Hyojin said. "To them, a species that's only been in space for 100 years might as well be infants." More aliens walked past. Them. Kyung-ho recognized some of the species from the files. The tall, thin Korthak with their silver skin. The round Bluvians who rolled instead of walked. The Zentari who looked like giant insects. All of them had technology that seemed like magic to humans. Ships that could travel between stars in hours instead of weeks. Weapons that could destroy planets. Computers that could think faster than 1,000,000 human brains working together. "Sometimes I wonder why we even try," Kyung-ho said. "Maybe they're right. Maybe we are just primitive apes who got lucky and found space travel." Hyojin was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "You know what's strange? I've been studying all these advanced species for 3 years. You want to know what I learned?" "What?" "They're all the same. They think in the same patterns. They solve problems in the same ways. They've become so advanced that they've forgotten how to be different." Kyung-ho looked at her. "What do you mean?" "When a Velthak faces a problem, they always use crystal technology. When a Morvanian has trouble, they always use energy manipulation. They've been using the same solutions for millions of years. And humans? We use whatever works. Rocks, sticks, nuclear bombs, computers, our bare hands. We don't care if it's elegant or advanced. We care if it works." An announcement came over. The station speakers. "All beings prepare for hyperspace jump. Station Omega-7 moving to Sector 12. The station shook slightly as massive engines started up. Through the window, Kyung-ho watched stars begin to blur and stretch. "The Federation Council meets again tomorrow," he said. "They're discussing the new trade agreements. Earth wants to sell our art and music. Will they listen? Probably not. The Velthak ambassador already said that human art is too emotional for civilized species, and our music is chaotic noise." Hyojin stood up. "I need to get back to my research. The Harmony is studying Korthak technology today. Maybe I can learn something useful." "Like what?" "Like how to make them take us seriously." She walked away, leaving Kyung-ho alone on the viewing deck. Around him, the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy continued their business. They made deals worth more money than Earth's entire economy. They planned projects that would take thousands of years to complete. They spoke casually about reshaping solar systems and creating new forms of life. And somewhere in the background, barely noticed, a few humans tried to prove they belonged in this vast galaxy. Kyung-ho didn't know that everything was about to change. He didn't know that in a few weeks, all of these advanced civilizations would be running for their lives. He didn't know that the same primitive, chaotic, emotional humans they laughed at would be the only thing standing between them and total destruction. For now, he just watched the stars and wondered if humanity would ever be more than a joke to the rest of the galaxy. The emergency signal woke Captain Dongwu from his sleep. Red lights flashed in his small cabin on the Federation ship Golden Dawn. He had been dreaming about his home on Earth, about walking in the mountains near Seoul. Now he was back in the cold reality of deep space. "Captain to the bridge immediately," the voice said over the speakers. "Priority Alpha emergency." Dongwu grabbed his uniform and ran to the command center. The Golden Dawn was not a human ship. It belonged to the Federation, and Dongwu was one of only 3 human officers allowed to serve on it. The rest of the crew were Velthak, Morvanian, and Zentari. When he reached the bridge, chaos filled the room. Admiral Subin, a Velthak with dark blue crystals, was speaking rapidly to several other officers. Her crystal body flashed different colors as she talked. This meant she was very upset. "What's happening?" Dongwu asked. Subin turned to him. Her voice sounded like breaking glass. "The Vorthak home system is gone." "Gone? What do you mean, gone? Destroyed, consumed, eaten." Subin's crystals turned deep red. "Something came out of dark space, something we have never seen before." She showed him the main screen. It displayed a star map of the galaxy. Where the Vorthak system used to be, there was nothing, just empty space. "Show him the recording," Subin said to her aide. The screen changed. It showed the last transmission from Vorthak Prime, the home world of a species that had ruled space for 10 million years. The planet looked normal at first. Cities covered in golden light, space stations orbiting peacefully, ships moving in organized patterns. Then something appeared at the edge of the system. It looked like a dark cloud at first. But as it got closer, Dongwu could see it was made of thousands of massive shapes. Each one was the size of a small moon. They moved like living things, stretching and twisting through space. The Vorthak defense fleet met them first. Dongwu watched ships fire their most powerful weapons at the dark shapes. Energy beams that could cut through mountains hit the creatures and did nothing. The dark shapes simply absorbed the attacks and grew larger. Then the creatures reached Vorthak Prime. They surrounded the planet like hungry animals. Long tentacles reached down to the surface. In minutes, the planet began to shrink. The creatures were eating it. Actually eating it. The recording ended. The Vorthak system was empty space. "How is that possible?" Dongwu asked. "We don't know," Subin replied. "But it's not just the Vorthak. 3 more systems have gone dark in the last week. The Morvanian colonies in Sector 15, the Zentari mining worlds, the Korthak research stations." More officers arrived on the bridge. Commander Jai Han, another human, looked as confused as Dongwu felt. Lieutenant Bo Young, a Zentari with insect-like features, was clicking nervously. "Do we have any information about these creatures?" Dongwu asked. Subin's crystals flickered. "Very little. They appear to be biological. They consume matter and energy to grow larger. They adapt to any weapon we use against them, and they're heading toward the core systems." A new message came in. It was from the Federation Council on Central Prime. Admiral Subin played it for everyone to hear. All Federation fleets are ordered to fall back to defensive positions around the core worlds. Evacuation of outer colonies begins immediately. All available ships are to assist in the withdrawal. Dongwu felt cold. "They're abandoning the outer systems?" "We have no choice," Subin said. "Whatever these creatures are, our weapons cannot stop them." The Draconians tried using their planet-killer beams. The creatures absorbed the energy and grew stronger. Another message arrived. This one was from the Morvanian Collective, the energy beings who controlled a quarter of the galaxy. The message was short and terrifying. Collective fleet destroyed. Homeworld consumed. Survivors retreating to Federation space. Enemy adapts to all energy-based attacks. Recommend immediate evacuation of all inhabited systems. The bridge went quiet. The Morvanian Collective had the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. If they couldn't fight these creatures, who could? "What about Earth?" Commander Jaihan asked. "Are they warning the outer worlds?" Subin's crystals dimmed. Earth is not considered a priority. The Federation Council believes these creatures will target advanced civilizations first. Primitive worlds like Earth are not in immediate danger. Dongwu felt anger rise in his chest. So they're not warning Earth at all? The Council believes it would cause unnecessary panic. Earth has no significant military. There is nothing they can do to help. More reports came in during the next hour. System after system went dark. Each time the same pattern repeated. The creatures appeared out of nowhere. They absorbed all attacks. They consumed everything in the system. Then they moved on. The Zentari tried using gravity weapons that could crush planets. The creatures ate the gravity itself. The Korthak used time distortion fields to slow the enemy down. The creatures moved through time like it didn't exist. "We need to see these creatures for ourselves," Dongwu said. "Can we get close to one of the attacked systems?" Subin looked at him like he was crazy. "You want to go toward these things? We need to understand what we're fighting. Maybe there's something the other fleets missed." Admiral Subin thought for a moment. Then she nodded. "The Helix system was attacked yesterday. We can jump there and observe from a safe distance." The Golden Dawn changed course. The hyperspace jump took 3 hours. When they arrived at the Helix system, Dongwu understood why everyone was so scared. The system used to have 5 planets and 2 space stations. Now there was 1 small planet left, and it was getting smaller by the minute. Hundreds of dark creatures surrounded it. Each one was massive beyond belief. They had long tentacles that reached down to the planet's surface. "Look at the size of them," Jaihan whispered. "Each one is bigger than our largest space station." As they watched, the creatures finished consuming the last planet. Then they began to move. All of them turned toward the same direction, toward the core systems of the galaxy. "They're heading for Central Prime," Subin said, "the Federation capital." "How fast are they moving?" Dongwu asked. "At their current speed, they will reach the outer core systems in 2 weeks. Central Prime in a month." Dongwu looked at the star map. Earth was in the opposite direction from Central Prime. The creatures would pass right by the Sol system, on their way to the galactic core. "Admiral, we need to warn Earth," he said. Subin's crystals flickered with annoyance. "The Federation Council has made their decision. Earth is not a priority. But they're going to pass right by our system. Earth has no strategic value. The creatures will ignore it." Dongwu wanted to argue, but he knew it wouldn't help. The Federation had made up their minds. Earth was too primitive to matter. Another message came from Federation Command. All ships were ordered to begin evacuation of the middle systems. Billions of beings would need to be moved to the core worlds. It was the largest evacuation in galactic history. "What if the core worlds can't stop them either?" Jaihan asked quietly. No one answered. They all knew the truth. No weapon in the galaxy had even slowed these creatures down. The most advanced civilizations were running away from an enemy they couldn't understand or fight. And somewhere in the Sol system, on a small blue planet that the galaxy considered primitive, 3 billion humans had no idea that death was coming toward them. The creatures moved through space like a dark tide, consuming everything in their path. They had been sleeping in the empty spaces between galaxies for millions of years. Now they were awake and hungry. Soon they would reach a small yellow star with 9 planets. One of those planets was covered with primitive apes who still used kinetic weapons and crude fusion power. The creatures expected it to be an easy meal. Lieutenant Tae-young was drinking coffee when the deep space sensors went crazy. He was working the night shift at Luna Base, the moon's main military facility. Most nights were quiet. Earth's defense systems hadn't detected anything dangerous. In 20 years, the coffee cup fell from his hands as alarms began screaming throughout the base. Red lights flashed everywhere. The main computer started showing readings that made no sense. "What the hell?" Tae-young said to himself. He ran to the sensor station. The numbers on the screen were impossible. Multiple objects were approaching the outer edge of the Sol system. Each one was massive, bigger than anything humans had ever built. "Commander Jin-ho to the control room immediately," Tae-young said, into his communicator. "We have a situation." Commander Jin-ho arrived 3 minutes later. She was a small woman, but everyone at Luna Base respected her. She had fought in the Mars colony wars and knew how to stay calm in emergencies. "Show me what we have," she said. Tae-young pointed at the main screen. 37 large objects entering our system from deep space. Each one is approximately 15 kilometers long. They're not following any known flight patterns. "Ships? I don't think so. They look organic, like giant living creatures." Jin-ho studied the readings. "How fast are they moving?" "They've slowed down since entering our system, but they're still moving faster than anything we've seen before." "Any communication attempts?" "None. They're not responding to our standard greeting signals." Jin-ho picked up the red phone that connected directly to Earth Command. "This is Luna Base. I need to speak with General Park immediately." While they waited, more information came in. The objects had spread out across the outer system. Some were heading toward Jupiter, others were moving toward Saturn, a few were coming directly toward Earth. "General Park is on the line," Tae-young said. "General, this is Commander Jin-ho at Luna Base. We have multiple unknown objects in our system, large biological entities of unknown origin." The general's voice crackled through the speaker. "How large?" 15 kilometers each. 37 total. They're not responding to communication." There was silence for a moment. Then General Park spoke again. "Commander, I need you to wake up President Jin-soo immediately. Use the emergency line." "Sir, are you sure? It's 3 in the morning in Seoul." "Commander, if what you're telling me is true, this could be first contact with an alien species. The President needs to know." Tae-young watched the screen as the objects got closer. Something was wrong with their movement patterns. They didn't fly like ships. They moved like animals hunting for food. President Jin-soo was awake when the call came through. She listened to the report without interruption. Then she asked the question everyone was thinking. "Are they hostile?" "We don't know yet, Madam President," Jin-ho replied, "but they're heading for our planets." "How long until they reach Earth?" Tae-young checked the calculations. "At current speed, 6 hours." President Jin-soo was quiet for a long moment. Then, she spoke with the voice that had led Earth through 3 major crises. "Commander Jin-ho, I want all defense platforms powered up immediately. Contact all colony worlds and space stations. Tell them to prepare for possible hostile contact. And wake up every military officer on Earth." "Yes, Madam President." The next hour was chaos. Earth's orbital defense platforms, built years ago but never used in real combat, slowly came online. Space elevators shut down for safety. All civilian ships were ordered to dock immediately. On Jupiter Station, Engineer Woo Jin watched through the observation deck as dark shapes approached the gas giant. They were huge beyond imagination. Each one looked like a living mountain, made of black flesh and strange growths. "They're not ships," he said to his partner Minseo. "They're alive." The array of creatures reached Jupiter and did something that made no sense. Long tentacles stretched out from their bodies and touched the planet's atmosphere. Jupiter began to change color. "Oh my God," Mincio whispered. "They're eating it." Back on Luna Base, Tae-young watched the same thing happen at Saturn. The creatures were consuming the gas giants, actually eating them. Saturn's famous rings began to disappear as the creatures absorbed the ice and rock. "Commander," Tae-young said, "I think we need to change our assumptions about these things." "What do you mean?" "I don't think they're here to talk." On Earth, President Jin-soo stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Seoul. The room was filled with military officers, scientists, and government officials. Everyone looked scared. "What's the status of our defenses?" she asked. General Park stepped forward. "All orbital platforms are online. We have 60 missile batteries and 30 plasma cannon arrays. Our fleet consists of 12 destroyers and 4 cruisers." "Will that be enough?" Dr. Sang-woo, Earth's top physicist, shook his head. "Madam President, based on the size of these creatures, our weapons might not be effective." "Explain." "Each creature is roughly the size of a small city. Our largest missiles are designed to destroy enemy ships, not living mountains." News of the invasion spread across Earth within hours. Every television station showed the same images from the outer system. Giant creatures eating Jupiter and Saturn, strange organic ships heading toward Earth. In military bases around the world, soldiers prepared for a battle they didn't understand. Commander Bo Ram led the first squadron of Earth's newest fighters. They were small, fast ships, armed with kinetic weapons and nuclear missiles. "Listen up," she told her pilots over the radio. "We don't know what these things are or what they want, but they're in our system and they're coming toward our planet. Our job is to stop them." The pilots were nervous. Their ships looked like toys compared to the massive creatures approaching Earth. But they were ready to fight. "Squadron leaders, this is Earth Command." General Park's voice came through their radios. "Enemy contact in 30 minutes. All pilots prepare for combat." As the creatures got closer to Earth, humanity got its first clear look at them. They were not ships at all. They were living things that looked like giant jellyfish made of dark meat and bone. Tentacles hundreds of meters long reached out from their bodies. Strange lights pulsed along their sides. The creatures moved through space like they were swimming through water. They didn't seem to notice the small human ships flying toward them. "This is Fighter 1, Bo Ram said into her radio. "I can see the lead creature. It's beautiful and terrible at the same time." The creature was indeed beautiful in its own alien way. Its body pulsed with colors that had no names. Patterns of light flowed across its surface like living art. But there was something hungry about it, something that wanted to consume everything it touched. "All fighters, you are cleared to engage," Earth Command said. "Good luck." Bo Ram felt, her heart beating fast as she aimed her weapons at the massive creature. She had trained for space combat her whole career, but nothing had prepared her for this. For Earth, she whispered to herself. Then she pressed the trigger. The first battle between humanity and the Devourers was about to begin. Around the world, people watched their televisions and prayed. In space stations and colonies, humans held their breath. Earth's primitive weapons were about to meet an enemy that had destroyed the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. No one expected the humans to win, but sometimes the galaxy is full of surprises. The kinetic projectiles from Bo Ram's fighter hit the creature's side. For a moment, nothing happened. Then something strange occurred. The creature jerked backward. Its pulsing lights flickered. It had been hurt. "Did you see that?" Boram shouted into her radio. The thing actually reacted. For the first time in weeks, humans had something the rest of the galaxy had been missing. They had hope. Engineer Wu Jin couldn't believe what he was seeing. The creature that had been eating Jupiter was moving away from the gas giant. It was wounded. Black liquid leaked from holes in its side where human missiles had hit it. Minseo, are you recording this? He asked his partner. Every second, she replied. The creature's bioarmor is regenerating, but slowly, much slower than it should be. On Luna Base, Commander Jin-Ho watched the battle through the main screen. Fighter squadrons from Earth were engaging the creatures in hit-and-run attacks. The human ships were tiny compared to the aliens, but they were doing something impossible. They were winning. How is this possible? Lieutenant Tae-young asked. These things destroyed entire civilizations. I don't know, Jin-Ho replied. But whatever we're doing, it's working. In orbit around Earth, pilot Yun-Su dove her fighter between two massive tentacles. The creature tried to grab her ship, but she moved in a random pattern that seemed to confuse it. Her missiles hit the creature's main body, causing it to writhe in pain. Fighter 7 to all pilots, she said over the radio. I think I know why we're hurting them. They can't predict our movements. Explain, Commander Boram's voice came back. These things have been fighting advanced aliens for who knows how long. All those species think logically. They follow patterns. But we're not following patterns. We're just doing whatever feels right. Meanwhile, in the orbital shipyards above Earth, Engineer Wu Jin was having the same realization. He had been watching the battle recordings over and over. Every time a human ship attacked in a predictable pattern, the creature defended easily. But when pilots acted on instinct, the creatures struggled to respond. The aliens were wrong about us, he said to Minseo. They said we were too chaotic and emotional. But that's exactly what we need to fight these things. Down on Earth, President Jin-Su was meeting with her top scientists and military officers. The early battle reports were encouraging, but the creatures were adapting. Their bioarmor was getting stronger. Their tentacles were moving faster. We need new weapons, General Park said. Our current missiles are effective, but not effective enough. Dr. Sang-Woo stepped forward. I may have an idea. These creatures seem to communicate through bioelectric fields. If we could disrupt those fields... How? Electromagnetic pulse weapons. We stopped using them decades ago because they were considered too crude for modern warfare. President Jin-Su smiled grimly. Too crude, just like everything else about us. Do we have any EMP weapons left? A few experimental ones in storage. But we could build more quickly if we use old technology instead of trying to make them fancy. Do it. In the Mars colonies, factory worker Giho was already ahead of them. He had been watching the battle feeds and making his own weapons. He knew how to work with metal and explosives from his job in the mines. Now he was teaching other colonists how to make simple but effective missiles. Forget computer guidance, he told his team. These creatures adapt to computer systems. We need dumb weapons that just fly straight and explode. His makeshift missiles were crude compared to military hardware. But they worked. And more importantly, the creatures couldn't predict or adapt to them because there was nothing complex to figure out. Back in Earth's orbital shipyards, Wu Jin was having a breakthrough of his own. He had been trying to figure out how to make their weapons more powerful. Then he realized he was thinking about the problem wrong. Minseo, what if we don't try to make better weapons? What do you mean? What if we make worse weapons? Cruder. Weapons. Weapons so simple that the creatures can't adapt to them? He started pulling apart a standard missile. Instead of the smart guidance system, he installed a simple timer. Instead of the advanced warhead, he used basic explosives. The result was a weapon that any human from 100 years ago would recognize. "It's basically a flying bomb," Minseo said. "Exactly. No computers, no advanced materials. Just metal, explosives, and attitude." While the adults were building weapons, 16-year-old Hyunwoo was making his own contribution to the war effort. He was a gaming champion who had spent years playing strategy games. Now he was watching the battle feeds and seeing patterns that the military computers missed. "Mom, I need to call Earth Command," he said to his mother. "Hyunwoo, they're busy fighting aliens. That's why they need my help." His mother thought he was crazy, but she made the call anyway. An hour later, Hyunwoo was on a video conference with General Park himself. "You're telling me that these creatures move like units in a strategy game?" the general asked. "Yes, sir. They use swarm intelligence. Each creature is part of a bigger mind. But that makes them predictable if you know how swarm AI works." "And you know how swarm AI works?" "I've been beating swarm AI in games for years. The trick is to not fight the swarm directly. You confuse it by doing random things that don't make tactical sense." General Park looked skeptical, but he was desperate for any advantage. "What do you recommend?" "Send ships in random directions. Attack empty space sometimes, retreat when you're winning, advance when you should retreat. Make the swarm intelligence think there are patterns when there aren't." It sounded crazy, but crazy was working better than logical. In space, the battle was changing. Human ships started following Hyunwoo's advice. They attacked in ways that made no sense. Fighters would suddenly break off from successful attacks and fly away. Others would charge directly at creatures 10 times their size. The creatures began to make mistakes. They prepared defenses for attacks that never came. They left themselves open while trying to figure out human behavior. Dr. Sang-woo watched the battle from Earth's main observatory. He was finally understanding why humans were succeeding where advanced aliens had failed. "We're not smarter than them," he said to his assistant. "We're not stronger than them. We're just different from everything else they've ever fought." "How so?" "Every advanced civilization in the galaxy thinks the same way. They use logic and patterns and predictable strategies. These creatures evolved to fight that kind of enemy. But we don't think like advanced aliens. We think like humans." The turning point came when veteran soldier Dong-min led a boarding party onto one of the wounded creatures. He and his team used weapons that the galactic community considered ancient: gunpowder explosives, chemical propellants, metal bullets fired by expanding gases. "These weapons are so old that the creature doesn't know how to defend against them," Dongmin reported over his radio. "Its bio-armor is designed to stop energy weapons. It's not built for old-fashioned bullets." His team fought their way through the creature's interior using tactics from Earth's military history. They moved unpredictably. They used whatever weapons they could find. When they ran out of ammunition, they used knives and clubs. The creature couldn't adapt to such primitive, chaotic fighting. Its internal defenses were overwhelmed by enemies who didn't follow any logical battle plan. "We're inside what looks like the creature's brain," Dong-min reported. "Setting charges now." The explosion lit up space like a small star. The massive creature convulsed once and went still. For the first time since the war began, one of the devourers was completely dead. Across the galaxy, Federation sensors detected the creature's death. On Central Prime, the Galactic Council received reports that seemed impossible. "The primitive humans have killed one of the creatures?" the Velthak Admiral asked in disbelief. "Confirmed. They used kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. Creature couldn't adapt to such crude technology. For millions of years, the galaxy had believed that more advanced meant better. Now a species of primitive apes was proving them wrong. The humans weren't winning because they were advanced. They were winning because they had refused to abandon the simple, brutal, chaotic methods that had helped them survive on Earth, and they were just getting started. Mechanic Yunji was working in the repair bay of Luna Base when she got an idea that would change the war. She was looking at pieces of a broken alien ship that had crashed on the moon years ago. Next to it was a damaged human missile launcher. "What if I put them together?" she said to herself. Her supervisor thought she was crazy. "Yunji, you can't just combine human and alien technology. They work on completely different principles." "That's exactly why it might work," she replied. "The creatures adapt to human weapons and alien weapons separately. But what if we make something that's both?" She spent 3 days welding, cutting, and rewiring. The result looked like something built by a mad scientist. It had human kinetic launchers powered by alien energy cells. The guidance system was part human computer, part alien crystal matrix. "It's ugly," her supervisor said. "It's perfect," Yunji replied. When they tested the weapon, something amazing happened. The hybrid missile moved in ways that confused both human and alien tracking systems. It accelerated like a human weapon, then suddenly shifted like an alien one. The creatures couldn't figure out how to defend against something that followed both human and alien physics at the same time. Word of Yunji's success spread quickly. Soon, mechanics and engineers all over the Sol system were building their own hybrid weapons. Each one was different, each one was strange, and each one was effective against the creatures. On Ceres Station, factory worker Giho was facing a different problem. His mining facility needed to produce ammunition for the war, but they didn't have military equipment. So he did what humans had always done when they needed something. He improvised. "We're going to build bullets the old way," he told his team. "Like they did on Earth 200 years ago." His workers looked confused. They were used to automated factories and computer-controlled production lines, but Giho taught them how to cast metal by hand, how to measure gunpowder with simple scales, how to build weapons using techniques their great-grandparents had used. "It's so primitive," one worker complained. "Good," Giho replied. "Primitive is what works." Their handmade ammunition was crude compared to modern military supplies, but it worked better against the creatures than the fancy computer-guided missiles. The creatures couldn't predict weapons made by human hands instead of human machines. In Earth orbit, Captain Minsu was dealing with an even bigger challenge. He commanded a cargo ship called the Lucky Dragon. It wasn't built for war. It was designed to carry supplies between Earth and the colonies. But now it was one of the only ships left that could reach the outer system. "Sir, we're not a warship," his second officer said. "We don't even have military shields." "Then we'll make our own shields," Minsu replied. He ordered his crew to weld metal plates to the outside of their ship. They attached spare engines to give them more speed. Most importantly, they loaded the cargo holds with nuclear warheads that had been banned by the galactic community for being too dangerous. "Nuclear weapons are barbaric," the alien civilizations had said. "Only primitive species use such crude devices." Now those crude devices were humanity's best hope. When the Lucky Dragon attacked its first creature, the nuclear explosion surprised everyone. The creature's bio-armor, which could absorb energy weapons easily, couldn't handle the raw destruction of nuclear fire. The alien tissue burned and withered. "Nuclear weapons work because they're stupid," Dr. Sang-Woo explained to President Jin Soo. They don't use advanced physics. They just break things apart at the most basic level. The creatures can't adapt to something so simple. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Hyun Woo, the teenager who had been helping with tactics, made a discovery while playing his strategy games. "I've been studying the battle recordings," he told General Park over video link. "The creatures aren't just using swarm intelligence. They're learning from our attacks." "We know that. They adapt to our weapons." "No, sir. They're learning our strategies too. But they're learning like a computer would. They expect us to get better at fighting over time." General Park frowned. "Don't we get better at fighting over time?" "Humans do, but not in ways computers expect. We also get worse at things. We make more mistakes when we're tired. We do stupid things when we're angry. We change our minds for no logical reason." Hyun-woo pulled up a battle chart. "Look at this pattern. Every time we start fighting better, the creatures adapt. But what if we start fighting worse on purpose?" It was the most ridiculous military strategy anyone had ever heard. But it worked. Human pilots began making deliberate mistakes during combat. They would fly into obvious traps, then escape in ways that made no sense. They would use terrible tactics that should have gotten them killed, but somehow worked anyway. The creature's adaptive intelligence couldn't handle enemies who got worse at fighting instead of better. Their learning algorithms broke down when trying to understand opponents who deliberately made stupid decisions. Commander Bo Ram was leading one of these stupid attacks when she discovered something even more important. She had been ordered to retreat from a battle that humans were winning. As she flew away, she noticed something strange about the creature she was fighting. "It's following me," she reported, "but it's not trying to catch me. It's trying to figure out why I'm retreating." The creature was so focused on understanding her illogical behavior that it ignored other human ships attacking its sides. By the time it realized the mistake, it was too late. The creature died because it was too busy trying to understand human stupidity. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt, mining engineer In Suk was making a discovery that would horrify the galactic community. She had been studying pieces of dead creatures, trying to understand how they worked. "Their biology is incredibly advanced," she reported to Earth Command. "They can adapt to almost any form of attack, but they have one weakness." "What is it?" "They're too perfect. Their adaptation systems assume that enemies will use the most effective weapons available. They can't handle enemies who deliberately use inferior weapons." She held up a simple metal rod. "This is a crowbar. It's one of the most primitive tools humans ever invented. And according to my calculations, it would be more effective against creature armor than our best energy weapons." The idea spread quickly. Human boarding parties began carrying the simplest weapons they could find: hammers, crowbars, kitchen knives, baseball bats, tools that hadn't been used in warfare for centuries. Veteran soldier Dong Min led one of these low-tech boarding parties. His team looked like barbarians compared to the advanced aliens who had tried to fight the creatures, but barbarians were exactly what the situation needed. "Remember?" he told his team as they approached a wounded creature. "Don't think. Just hit things until they stop moving." They fought their way through the creature's interior using pure human rage and determination. When their primitive weapons broke, they used rocks. When they ran out of rocks, they used their bare hands. The creature's defenses couldn't adapt to enemies who fought like wild animals. "This is insane," one of his soldiers said as they planted explosive charges in the creature's brain. "Yeah," Dong Min replied, "but it's working." The explosion killed another massive creature. Around the Sol system, more human ships were arriving with improvised weapons and impossible tactics. Civilian vessels converted to warships. mining equipment turned into siege weapons, pleasure boats loaded with nuclear bombs. Everything was wrong according to military science. Nothing followed proper doctrine. The entire human war effort looked like organized chaos, and it was destroying an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. News of humanity's success began reaching other star systems. The advanced civilizations that had dismissed humans as primitive apes were getting reports that seemed impossible. "They're winning with Stone Age weapons?" the Morvanian collective asked in disbelief. "Confirmed. They use kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, and hand-to-hand combat. The creatures cannot adapt to such primitive methods." On Central Prime, the Galactic Council faced a terrible truth. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were helpless against the Devourers. But a species they considered barely intelligent was not just surviving, it was winning. The humans weren't succeeding despite being primitive. They were succeeding because they were primitive. They had kept all the chaotic, inefficient, illogical methods that truly advanced species had abandoned long ago. And now, those abandoned methods were the only thing standing between the galaxy and total destruction. Admiral Ji-hoon stood on the bridge of the battleship Soul's Pride and watched the impossible sight before him. 3 months ago, Earth had been considered a backward world barely worth noticing. Now the Sol system was the most heavily defended place in the galaxy. Hundreds of ships filled the space around Earth. Most of them used to be civilian vessels, cargo ships with missiles welded to their hulls, mining barges carrying nuclear warheads, tourist shuttles converted to fighters. They looked like a junkyard fleet, but they had done something no other force in the galaxy could claim. They had stopped the Devourers. "Status report," Ji-hoon ordered. Lieutenant Commander Yu-jin checked her displays. 16 creatures remaining in the outer system. 7 are heavily damaged and retreating. The rest are trying to regroup near Neptune. And our forces? 237 ships ready for combat. Mix of military, converted civilian, and hybrid vessels. Ammunition stores are holding steady thanks to the series production lines. Ji-hoon nodded. The humans had done more than just survive the initial attack. They had built an entire war machine based on principles that made no sense to anyone else in the galaxy, and now it was time to take the fight to the enemy. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Begin Operation Hammer." Operation Hammer was the most human battle plan ever created. It had no elegant strategies or sophisticated tactics. It was designed around one simple idea: hit the enemy so hard and so chaotically that their adaptive intelligence couldn't keep up. The first wave consisted of 50 cargo ships loaded with every type of explosive humanity had ever invented. Some carried nuclear warheads, others had chemical bombs. A few were loaded with simple dynamite made in Earth's underground factories. Captain Wan Shik commanded the lead ship, a converted grain hauler called the Fighting Sparrow. His crew was a mix of former cargo pilots, mining engineers, and volunteers, who had never been in space combat before. "Remember," he told them over the ship's communication system, "we're not trying to be heroes. We're trying to be unpredictable. Fly like you're drunk. Shoot at anything that moves. If something doesn't make sense, do it anyway." The human fleet approached the creatures in patterns that violated every rule of space warfare. Some ships flew straight at the enemy. Others moved in spirals. A few flew backward while shooting forward. The overall effect looked like organized chaos, and it was working. The creatures had learned to adapt to logical attack patterns, but the human fleet wasn't using logic. Ships would suddenly change direction for no reason. Fighters would break off from successful attacks to chase empty space. Bombers would drop their weapons early and fly away, only to circle back and attack from a different angle. Scientist Insuk watched the battle from her research station and finally understood what made humans so effective against the Devourers. "We're not just unpredictable," she explained to her assistant over the communication link. "We're authentically chaotic. Other species can try to act random, but they're still thinking logically underneath. Humans actually are random. We make decisions based on emotions, instincts, and pure stubbornness." Her theory was proven when pilot Dai Jung made one of the most illogical decisions in military history. He was flying a small fighter against a massive creature when his weapons jammed. Instead of retreating, he flew directly into the creature's mouth. "Dai Jung, what are you doing?" his squadron leader screamed over the radio. "I don't know," Dai Jung replied. "It just feels right." He flew through the creature's digestive system, shooting at everything he could see with his backup weapons. The creature writhed in agony as he destroyed its internal organs from the inside. When his fighter finally exploded, it took out the creature's main nervous system. No tactical computer would ever have calculated that attack. No advanced alien species would have attempted something so suicidal. But it worked because the creature's defenses were designed to stop external attacks, not internal ones. The battle reached its turning point when engineer Yunji's hybrid weapons proved their worth on a large scale. She had been working with teams across the system to mass-produce weapons that combined human and alien technology in impossible ways. "The key is to make them wrong," she explained to the weapons teams. "Take human projectiles and alien guidance systems, but wire them backward. Use alien energy sources to power human engines, but don't make them compatible. Create weapons that shouldn't work, but do anyway." The hybrid weapons confused the creatures completely. They couldn't adapt to weapons that followed multiple conflicting sets of physics at the same time. A missile that accelerated like a human rocket but curved like an alien energy beam was beyond their ability to predict or counter. Meanwhile, young Hyun-woo had been promoted to official tactical advisor despite being only 16 years old. His understanding of swarm intelligence was helping human commanders stay one step ahead of the creatures. "They're trying to regroup," he reported. To Admiral Ji-hoon, "The remaining creatures are forming a defensive formation near Neptune. What do you recommend?" "Don't attack the formation directly. That's what they expect. Instead, send ships to attack empty space around Neptune. Make them think we're setting a trap when we're not. Then hit them from the direction they're not watching." It was the kind of strategy that would have failed against any logical opponent. But the creatures weren't logical. They were adaptive, which meant they tried to counter strategies that didn't exist. The final assault on Neptune began with the strangest fleet action in galactic history. Human ships spread out around the planet and began shooting at nothing. They fired missiles at empty space. They aimed their weapons at asteroids that posed no threat. They charged their shields as if preparing for battle, then flew away in random directions. The creatures watched this behavior and tried to understand the pattern. Their collective intelligence worked frantically to figure out the human strategy. They repositioned themselves to counterattacks that never came. They prepared defenses for weapons that were never fired. While the creatures were busy being confused, the real attack began. A small group of mining ships approached Neptune from the planet's shadow. They weren't military vessels. They were simple rock haulers that had been converted to carry the largest nuclear warheads Earth could build. Factory worker Giho led this final assault team. His ship, the Ceres Hammer, was nothing but engines, life support, and enough nuclear weapons to crack a moon. "This is probably suicide," he told his crew. "Probably." his second-in-command agreed. But it's the right kind of suicide. They flew through Neptune's rings, using the ice and rock as cover. The creatures were still focused on the decoy fleet, trying to understand the non-existent strategy. By the time they noticed the mining ships, it was too late. Jiho's team released their nuclear weapons directly into the cluster of creatures. But these weren't ordinary nuclear bombs. They had been modified using techniques that would have horrified advanced civilizations. "We made them dirty," Jiho explained over the radio as his ship fled the blast zone. "Lots of radiation, lots of fallout, completely illegal by galactic law." The explosions lit up Neptune like a small sun. The creatures, caught in the middle of the blast, couldn't adapt fast enough to the raw destructive force. Their bio-armor, designed to handle clean energy weapons, dissolved under the assault of primitive nuclear fire. 7 creatures died in that single attack. The remaining few, badly wounded and completely confused by human tactics, began to retreat toward the edge of the solar system. "Should we pursue?" Admiral Ji-hoon asked. "No," said Hyun-woo. "Let them go, but follow them at a distance. I want to see where they're running to." The retreating creatures headed toward deep space, broadcasting distress signals that human equipment could barely detect. But they weren't calling for help. They were warning other creatures to stay away from the Sol system. "They're afraid of us," Dr. Sang-woo realized as he analyzed the signals. These creatures that destroyed entire civilizations are actually afraid of primitive humans. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On Central Prime, the Galactic Council received reports that changed everything they thought they knew about warfare, intelligence, and survival. "The humans have driven off the Devourers," the Velthak Admiral announced to the assembled representatives, "using primitive weapons and chaotic tactics." The chamber fell silent. These were the same creatures that had consumed dozens of advanced civilizations, and they had been defeated by a species that the Council had classified as barely intelligent. "How is this possible?" the Morvanian collective asked. "We don't know, but we need to find out, and we need to find out quickly." Because across the galaxy, more devourer swarms were stirring. The defeat at Sol had awakened something ancient and hungry. Creatures that had been sleeping between galaxies for millions of years were beginning to move. The real war was just beginning. But, for the first time in galactic history, there was hope. Somewhere in a small solar system around an ordinary yellow star, a species of primitive apes had proven that sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and they were ready to teach the rest of the galaxy how to survive. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 50-million-year history. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the Great Chamber on Central Prime. They had come to hear something impossible, a report on how the most primitive species in the galaxy had done what none of them could do. Ambassador Kyung-ho stood at the center of the chamber where he had been ignored for years. Now every being in the room was listening to his words with desperate attention. "The Sol system is secure," he announced. "All devourer creatures have been driven away or destroyed. Earth's defense fleet remains operational and ready to assist other worlds." The chamber erupted in sounds that no universal translator could handle. Crystalline beings chimed in disbelief. Energy creatures pulsed with confusion. Insect-like species clicked frantically. Everyone was trying to understand how this was possible. Admiral Subin, the Velthak commander who had once dismissed Earth as worthless, stood up. Her crystal body flickered with colors that showed deep embarrassment. "Ambassador Kyung-ho," she said formally. The Velthak Empire requests detailed information about human combat methods. We need to know how you succeeded where we failed. Similar requests came from across the chamber. The Morvanian Collective wanted to study human ship designs. The Zentari Empire begged for weapon specifications. The mighty Draconian Republic, rulers of space for 50 million years, asked if they could send observers to learn from Earth's military. For the first time in his career, Kyung-ho was the most important person in the room. I will share what information I can, he said. But first you need to understand something about humans. We don't fight the way you do. We don't think the way you do. And that's exactly why we won. On Earth, President Jin-Soo was dealing with similar requests. Her communication systems were overwhelmed with messages from alien governments. Everyone wanted to know the secret of humanity's success. Set up a conference with all the major powers, she ordered her staff. It's time we had a serious conversation about this war. The Galactic Conference took place 3 days later. Leaders from dozens of civilizations appeared as holograms in Earth's Situation Room. These were beings who had never bothered to speak with humans before. Now they were asking for help. The Devourer threat is spreading, reported the Zentari Emperor, a massive insect-like creature whose species had ruled 1,000 worlds. More swarms are awakening across the galaxy. We estimate millions of creatures are moving toward inhabited systems. President Jin-Soo nodded grimly. How many advanced fleets have been destroyed? All of them, admitted the Morvanian Prime, an entity of pure energy who spoke with the voice of a dying star. Every weapon we possess has proven useless. The creatures adapt to our technology within minutes. Then you need to stop using advanced technology, said General Park, who was sitting next to President Jin-Soo. You need to fight like humans. The alien leaders looked confused. The Velthak Admiral's crystals flickered with skeptical colors. Explain what you mean by fighting like humans, she requested. General Park activated a holographic display showing recent battle footage from the Sol system. The alien leaders watched human ships moving in chaotic patterns, firing primitive weapons at massive bioorganisms. This looks like random violence, the Draconian Chancellor observed. His ancient species had fought wars for millions of years, but always with perfect tactical precision. That's because it is random violence, General Park replied. We use weapons that shouldn't work. We fly ships in patterns that make no sense. We make decisions based on emotions instead of logic. The creatures can't adapt to chaos because chaos has no pattern to learn. Engineer Chan-ho, who had been invited to the conference as a technical expert, stepped forward. We can teach you how to build simple weapons, kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, nuclear devices, things so primitive that the creatures won't know how to defend against them. Nuclear weapons are barbaric, protested the Morvanian Prime. We banned such crude devices millions of years ago. Then you banned the only weapons that work against these enemies, Chan-ho replied. You've spent so long trying to be civilized that you forgot how to be effective. The uncomfortable truth was spreading across the galaxy. Advanced civilizations had become too advanced. They had developed perfect weapons, perfect tactics, and perfect strategies, but perfection was predictable, and predictable enemies could be defeated by the Devourers. Only humans had remained imperfect. Only humans still used crude methods that defied logic and efficiency, and those crude methods were the key to survival. Captain Dong-woo was leading one of the first joint training missions when he truly understood how different humans were from other species. A Velthak war fleet had arrived at the Sol system, asking to learn human tactics. The Velthak ships were beautiful. They moved like crystals floating through water, perfectly coordinated and utterly logical. But when Dongwu tried to teach them human combat methods, problems arose immediately. "You want us to fly randomly?" asked the Velthak captain, her crystal body pulsing with confusion. "But random movement is inefficient. It wastes energy and creates unnecessary risk." "That's the point," Dongwu explained. "The creatures expect efficient movement. Give them chaos instead." The training exercise was a disaster. The Velthak ships tried to fly randomly, but their version of random was still too organized. Their crystal minds couldn't truly embrace chaos. Even when they tried to be unpredictable, they followed patterns. "You're thinking too much," Dongwu told them over the communication link. "Stop planning your moves. Just do whatever feels right in the moment." "That makes no tactical sense," the Velthak captain replied. "Exactly." Similar problems occurred with other alien species. The Morvanian energy beings couldn't understand why humans used physical weapons when energy was so much cleaner. The Zentari couldn't grasp why human soldiers fought as individuals instead of as a perfect hive mind. But slowly, some of them began to learn. A young Velthak officer named Crystal Song started to understand human thinking. Instead of planning her moves in advance, she began reacting to combat situations with something approaching instinct. "It feels wrong," she told Dongwu after a successful training mission. "Everything about this fighting style feels wrong, but it works." "Now you're getting it," Dongwu replied. "Welcome to being human." Dr. Hyojin was working with alien scientists to reverse engineer human success when she made a disturbing discovery. She had been analyzing why human weapons were so effective against creatures that could adapt to any logical technology. "The Devourers aren't just adapting to our weapons," she explained to a joint research team of human and alien scientists. "They're adapting to our thoughts." "Explain," requested the Zentari researcher, whose insect-like head tilted with curiosity. "These creatures can somehow read the logical patterns in how we think about warfare. When a Velthak pilot aims a weapon, they think about energy dynamics and crystal resonance. The creatures learn to defend against that type of thinking. And humans? Humans don't think logically about warfare. We think emotionally. We get angry, scared, desperate. We make decisions based on feelings instead of calculations. The creatures can't read emotional patterns because emotions aren't logical." This revelation horrified the advanced species. They had spent millions of years evolving beyond emotion, seeing it as a weakness to be overcome. Now they were learning that emotions might be the key to survival. Meanwhile, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Human advisors were helping alien fleets prepare for devourer attacks. The results were mixed, but encouraging. The Korthak Defense Fleet had successfully destroyed 3 creatures using modified human tactics. They had learned to fire their weapons without computer guidance, aiming by instinct instead of calculation. The Bluvian Home Guard had driven off a small devourer swarm using weapons that their scientists called embarrassingly primitive. Nuclear missiles guided by simple timers instead of advanced computers. But not everyone was succeeding. The proud Draconian Empire had refused to adopt human methods, calling them beneath the dignity of an ancient civilization. Their core worlds were now under attack, and their perfect fleets were being systematically destroyed. "Pride will get you eaten," commented Hyunwoo, who was now serving as a tactical advisor to multiple alien governments. The Draconians would rather die with honor than live by acting like primitive humans. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Survival sometimes required abandoning everything you thought made you superior. It meant embracing chaos, inefficiency, and methods that seemed wrong to advanced minds. On Earth, President Jinsu watched the reports and felt a mixture of pride and sadness. Humanity was finally being taken seriously by the galactic community, but it had taken the near extinction of advanced civilizations to make them notice. "We're not saving the galaxy because we're better than them," she said to her advisors. "We're saving the galaxy because we never forgot how to be worse than them." The real test was coming. Massive devourer swarms were approaching the core worlds. Billions of advanced beings were depending on lessons learned from a species they had dismissed as primitive apes. Soon they would discover if the galaxy was ready to fight like humans, or if it was too late to learn. Admiral Ji-hoon stood on the observation deck of the battleship New Seoul and watched the impossible sight before him. The space around Proxima Centauri was filled with ships from dozens of different worlds, all working together under human command. Velthak crystal ships flew alongside crude human destroyers. Morvanian energy vessels moved in formation with converted Earth cargo haulers. 6 months ago, this fleet would have been laughable to any military expert in the galaxy. Now it was the most powerful force ever assembled, because it was the only force that could fight the Devourers and win. "Final target is holding position near the 4th planet," reported Captain Eugene. "Biomass readings indicate it's the largest creature we've encountered." Ji-hoon nodded grimly. This was the last known devourer in civilized space. All the others had been destroyed or driven away by the combined human-alien fleets. But this final creature was different. It was huge beyond anything they had seen before, and it seemed to be learning from the defeats of its kind. "It's been studying our tactics," observed Hyun-woo, who was now officially the youngest admiral in galactic history at 17 years old. "This creature has adapted to human-style warfare." "How is that possible?" asked Crystal Song, the Velpak officer, who had become one of the first aliens to truly understand human combat methods. "Because it's not trying to be logical anymore," Hyun-woo explained. "It's trying to be chaotic like us, but it's failing because it doesn't understand that real chaos comes from emotion, not calculation." The final battle began with what looked like a disaster. The massive creature met the combined fleet with tactics that seemed almost human. It moved unpredictably. It used weapons that made no logical sense. It even seemed to be making deliberate mistakes. For a few terrifying minutes, it looked like the creature had learned to fight like a human. Several ships were destroyed by attacks that came from impossible angles. The alien crews began to panic, reverting to their old logical combat patterns. "Hold formation," Ji-hoon ordered over the communication channels. "Remember your training." But it was Dr. Hyejin, watching from the research vessel Harmony, who provided the key insight that won the war. "The creature is making fake emotions," she announced over the fleet communication system. "It's trying to copy human feelings, but it doesn't understand what feelings actually are. Look at its attack patterns. They're chaotic, but they're mathematically chaotic. Real human emotion isn't mathematical." She was right. The creature was simulating human irrationality using complex algorithms. It could copy the appearance of chaotic behavior, but it couldn't copy the genuine feelings that drove human warriors to do impossible things. "All ships," Admiral Ji-hoon ordered, "stop thinking and start feeling. Remember why we're fighting. Remember what we're protecting." The tide of battle turned when the human crews stopped trying to be tactical and started being emotional. Pilot Day 1, whose sister had died in the first Devourer attack on Mars, flew his fighter straight into the creature's main tentacle while screaming her name. The creature couldn't predict an attack driven by pure grief and rage. Captain Min Jung, commanding a converted civilian transport, rammed her ship into the creature's side when her weapons ran out. "For my children!" she yelled as her ship exploded, tearing a massive hole in the creature's bioarmor. The alien crews watched in amazement as human warriors fought with an intensity that couldn't be calculated or copied. They threw their lives away for causes that made no logical sense. They made decisions based on love, hate, pride, and desperation instead of tactical analysis. And gradually, some of the aliens began to understand. Crystal Song felt something she had never experienced before as she watched human soldiers sacrifice themselves for their friends. It was an emotion that Velthak had evolved beyond millions of years ago, but now she remembered what her ancestors had called it. Love. She flew her crystal ship into the heart of the battle, not because it was tactically sound, but because she wanted to protect the humans who had taught her how to feel again. Other aliens followed her example. Zentari officers ignored hive mind commands to do what felt right instead of what was ordered. Morvanian entities abandoned perfect energy efficiency to fight with something approaching passion. The creature couldn't adapt to enemies who were driven by genuine emotions instead of simulated ones. Its adaptive intelligence broke down when faced with warriors who fought for reasons that had nothing to do with logic or survival. Engineer Yunji delivered the final blow. She had been working throughout the battle to create one last hybrid weapon. This one combined human nuclear technology with alien matter converters and something new. Weapons guided by human emotions instead of computer systems. "I'm linking the guidance system to the crew's emotional state," she explained to Admiral Ji-hoon. "The weapons will fly toward whatever the gunners care most about protecting." It was the most ridiculous weapons system ever designed. It violated every principle of military engineering. It shouldn't have worked at all. It was perfectly human. The emotion-guided missiles flew through space in patterns that no computer could calculate. They curved around obstacles not because of programmed flight paths, but because the human gunners felt their way to the target. They struck the creature in places that tactical analysis would never have chosen, but that somehow felt right to the warriors firing them. The massive creature died as the sun set on the old galactic order. 1 year later, President Jinsu stood at the podium in the new Galactic Council chamber on Earth. The chamber was different from the old one on Central Prime. It was built to accommodate beings who thought with their hearts as well as their minds. "The Devourer War is officially over," she announced to representatives from hundreds of worlds. "All known creatures have been destroyed or driven beyond galactic boundaries. The threat to civilized space has ended." The applause came in dozens of different forms. Crystals chimed, energy beings pulsed, and insects clicked. But now there was something new in those sounds. Emotion, joy, relief, gratitude. The galaxy had learned to feel again. But this victory came at a cost, President Jinsu continued. Not just the cost in lives and ships, but the cost in assumptions. We all learned that advancement doesn't always mean improvement, that efficient doesn't always mean effective, that logic doesn't always lead to the right answer. In the audience, Ambassador Kyung-ho sat in the front row instead of the back. Next to him were alien leaders who had once ignored his existence. Now they listened to every word from human speakers with the attention they had once reserved for their own kind. "The galaxy is different now," President Jinsu said. We have ships that combine human chaos with alien precision. We have weapons that shouldn't work but do. We have warriors who fight with their hearts instead of just their heads. Dr. Hai Jin, now the director of Galactic Defense Research, presented the final statistics. Human-trained fleets have successfully defended 47 star systems. Hybrid human-alien technologies have proven effective in 92% of combat situations. Most importantly, 17 different species have reported successful integration of emotion-based decision-making into their military doctrines. The changes went beyond military matters. Velthak artists were creating crystal sculptures that captured human emotions in solid form. Zentari hives were experimenting with individual creativity alongside collective thinking. Even the ancient Draconians were learning that millions of years of perfect logic had cost them something important. They were learning to be imperfect again. Captain Boram, now Admiral of the Solar Defense Fleet, was training the next generation of galactic warriors. Her students included beings from dozens of species, all learning the most important lesson humans had to teach. The key to being human isn't about being the smartest or the strongest, she told her mixed class of organic and energy-based students. It's about being willing to be wrong, messy, and emotional when the situation calls for it. A young Zentari officer raised a clawed hand. But Admiral, how do we know when to use logic and when to use emotion? Boram smiled. You don't know. You feel it. That's what makes it work. The classroom erupted in the various sounds that different species made when they were confused but trying to understand. It was a sound that had become common across the galaxy as ancient civilizations learned to think like young humans. Meanwhile, in the research labs beneath Sol, teams of human and alien scientists were working on the next challenge. Reports were coming in from deep space exploration missions. There were other threats out there beyond the galaxy's edge. Ancient things that made the Devourers look small. We'll be ready for them, Dr. Sang-woo told President Jin Soo during their weekly briefing. The galaxy is different now. We've taught them that sometimes the best solution is the one that makes the least sense. Factory worker Gi-ho had become the director of the new interspecies weapons development program. His factories on Ceres were now producing weapons for dozens of different species. Each weapon was a unique combination of human crudeness and alien sophistication. The Morvanian energy bombs with human timer systems are particularly effective, he reported to the Defense Committee. The energy beings still don't understand why adding an old-fashioned clock makes their